It's the scary monster lurking in the back of every writing class. Today, we're talking about plagiarism. Hey friends, it's good to see you again. Not too long ago, one of you asked if I could spend some time talking about plagiarism, and while it's not perhaps the most glamorous topic, it is a really important one, so I thought this would be a good time to share my thoughts. And really, my thoughts are, don't do it. It's really easy not to do, so just don't. And with that, thanks for watching. Anyhow, I think plagiarism is a lot easier to understand intuitively when we go back to the word's origins, and I really can't think of anybody who would do a better job talking about a word's origins than the director of the Quintillion Institute of Words About Words himself, so let's hear it from him. At first glance, plagiarism looks like a rather unusual term, but I put a small team of auxiliary researchers on the case, and it turns out that the word plagiarism comes from the Latin plagium, which means kidnapping. So in essence, a plagiarist is the sort of villain who kidnaps somebody else's work and then presents it as if it were their own. And I'm sure we can all agree that that's a rather miserable thing to do. So plagiarism is kind of like academic kidnapping, and it involves taking previous intellectual work, whether that's words or ideas, without giving credit to their original creator. Obviously, kidnapping is bad, and so is plagiarism. In fact, plagiarism can be so serious that people get expelled from school or fired from their jobs because of it. It kind of undermines the whole point of getting an education or writing at all, so it's best not to get mixed up in it. The most commonly discussed form of plagiarism involves stealing from other people, but it's actually possible to steal from your past self as well. If your teacher asks you to write a paper and you just turn in a paper that you wrote a semester ago, that's still plagiarism. And that would kind of defeat the purpose of an assignment anyway. Self-plagiarism is kind of like having a personal trainer tell you to do exercises to get back in shape, so you just send them a video of you doing exercise a few years ago. Like, cool, that's great that you were awesome back then, but that's not really going to help you now, is it? So the surest way to avoid plagiarism is just to do your own work and not steal stuff. And like I said, that's not hard to do. Just decide today not to steal stuff and you'll be fine. You can only commit plagiarism if you're trying to be dishonest, so just don't be dishonest. But of course, it's also important not to appear as though you've plagiarized. Whether you've meant to plagiarize or not, saying that it was an accident isn't a very good defense, because of course I didn't mean to is just the sort of thing that a plagiarist would say if they were accused. So we can all agree that we'll never commit intentional, willful, lying, cheating, stealing kinds of plagiarism, but in order to help you to avoid the unintentional appearance of plagiarism and keep yourself free of any unfair accusations, here are 2 keys to keep yourself as far away from plagiarism as possible. At the risk of saying something obvious, the best way to avoid looking like an academic kidnapper is to cite your sources. There's nothing wrong with using other people's words and ideas in your writing. The problem only arises when you don't give people credit for it. So whenever you include something in your paper that you didn't come up with as you were writing it, you should be sure to tell your readers where it came from. I don't know about you, but I remember being taught growing up that you didn't have to cite something if you put it in your own words, as if you could take someone's work, swap out a few of the words, and then pretend that it was something that you came up with yourself. To me, that sounds a lot like kidnapping someone, giving them a haircut, and then saying you didn't kidnap them. You clearly did, and giving them a haircut doesn't somehow make that okay. So, to be abundantly clear, even if you put somebody else's ideas in your own words, you still have to give them credit because it's their idea. Citing sources is not just about citing direct quotations, it's also about citing ideas. So even if you're paraphrasing something, you'd better be ready to provide a citation. Citations are a way of giving people credit for their work, and because so much of academic writing depends on building on the ideas of others, giving credit is an important way of showing where your ideas have come from and of participating in an active community of scholars. Basically, if you didn't think it or write it, you'd better cite it. Now, there is one exception that isn't actually an exception at all. If an idea isn't really from anyone in particular, there's no need to cite it. So, for things that are common knowledge, like that bananas are yellow, that Colorado became a state in 1876, or that water is made from hydrogen and oxygen, there's really nobody to steal those facts from because nobody owns them, so there's no need to cite them. Of course, there are other reasons for citing sources beyond just avoiding plagiarism, so you might still want to find sources to cite when you're dealing with those common knowledge facts, but we'll get to that in a later video. For now, just remember that you should be citing sources and giving credit whenever you're working with words or ideas that didn't come from your own brain. Because it turns out it's pretty hard to accuse someone of plagiarism when all their sources have been properly cited. So the most fundamental thing that you can do to avoid looking like a plagiarist is to cite your sources. But I regularly see even the most conscientious students falling into a trap that opens them up to accusations of plagiarism. Luckily, there's a surefire way to avoid that trap, and as a handy bonus, it makes things easier for your readers too. And the secret is to make it absolutely clear what material is coming from your sources and what material is coming from you. So to see what I mean, here's a paragraph that's pretty similar to paragraphs that I regularly see in academic papers. There's a lot that we could do to improve this paragraph, but let's just focus on the clarity of the citations and the risky appearance of plagiarism. If you look at this paragraph, how much of it do you know for sure comes from the original source? Well, if we use direct attribution and quotation marks as a guide, only what appears in yellow is clearly and definitely taken from this writer's source. But if I know anything about what usually happens in paragraphs like this, it's very likely that all of this information is also from the same source. The problem, though, is that that's not explicitly obvious. It might be reasonable to say that all of these statistics come from the last source that was cited in the paragraph, but it's not a guarantee. Those statistics just appear without any explicit or obvious link to a source. So it would be perfectly understandable for a reader to assume that those statistics just come from the writer's own research, and that the quoted material is just a source that agrees with the writer's conclusions. In this case, the writer hasn't intentionally done anything wrong, but it sure looks like they might be taking credit for somebody else's work, and that puts them at risk of unwanted accusations. Luckily, fixing the problem is as simple as making it explicitly clear that the information did, in fact, come from somewhere else. They could just put a citation at the end of every sentence so that nobody could misunderstand, but that's a decidedly inelegant solution. So it would probably be better to do something like this. See, in this version, even without parenthetical citations, there are clues in each sentence that make it very clear that all of the information is coming from the same source that was cited at the beginning of the paragraph. I can't tell you the number of times that I've written on a paper I think all this information is coming from the same source, but I can't know for sure. So it's a common issue, and I always suggest that writers spend a little bit more time making it explicitly clear to their readers which information is coming from their sources and which information is coming from themselves. Not only does that protect them from accusations of plagiarism, but it also takes away another chance for your readers to get confused. Beyond protecting yourself, you also don't want your readers to miss your larger points because they're too busy trying to figure out where the information in your paper is coming from. Plagiarism isn't a very exciting or maybe even a terribly pleasant topic, but the stakes are high, so it's important to know about. It's like kidnapping someone else's work, and that is a real problem. But like we've already discussed, it's easy to avoid. Just don't steal, plain and simple. And then you can provide plenty of evidence that you're not stealing by citing your sources clearly and then making it explicit which information is coming from your sources and which information is coming from you. Do that and you'll be just fine. So thanks again for the suggestion. I'm glad we had a chance to cover this topic. If there are other things any of you would like us to discuss on the show, let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do about making it happen. Either way though, thanks for watching and being awesome, and we'll see you again soon. Isn't that right, buddy? It sure is. I can hardly wait.